Hey, what's up guys? This is Oakley, and I figure I'd take a break from the Rome news thing. I know it's exciting, but I figure, there's a bit more for those of you who want to get even more prep for Rome 2 Total War, and I know a lot of you are probably, historically inclined or who want to know a lot more about the period. Either you've already looked into it, or maybe you just want to get, more detail on the ancient historical battles and the context. I know Total War personally got me really interested in ancient history, so I'm going to go ahead and share you books from my own personal collection, and I'm going to share with you kind of what I would recommend based off different reading levels, different authors, different time periods, and different subject matter. So let's go ahead and get started. Basically, what I want you to do is definitely go for Steven Pressfield. So right here. Steven Pressfield has written a lot of these books, and they've been bestsellers. These are critically acclaimed books. He writes in terms of fictional characters, but in terms of like historical battles. So it's a blend. It's historical, or fiction, I should say. So for example, he'll cover in this book. This is the Gates of Fire, the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, while all the events in the book, or the main ones in the book, will be historical. He makes up the characters, the flavors, the dialogue, of course, a lot of history we can't know, so he fills in the details, and he fills them to an incredible amount of detail. These books are a blast to read. It's almost like you have a war reporter right there who took down notes of everything everyone was saying. Everything is to such a high degree of historical authenticity in terms of details of the weapons, training. It goes into high detail about Spartan society and warrior culture. So if you want to know more about Sparta, please read this book. Not only does it cover Sparta in a more realistic way than the movie 300 with the bare-chested, Gerard Butlers, but this goes into the dynamics of the Spartan society, their culture, their relationship with the Helots. It follows young Spartans who rise up, who witness battles of the veteran Spartan soldiers. You see their tales, you see them fight in the Olympics, you see sort of the Greek mentality, and it really comes to life in this book, and it epitomizes. Basically, it comes to a pinnacle at the Battle of Thermopylae at the end. Of course, in the interim, you get a lot of battles in between and a lot of preparation, sort of preparing for war, diving you into this world, the Hellenic world. And when it comes to the battle, you can't put this book down. It's so good, and it's not like the movie 300 where it's kind of cheesy and you're like, how could these Spartans have survived? They would have gotten slaughtered. Well, this book goes and sort of puts it in high detail. It puts out every sort of battle, Spartans holding the line, their allies there, cyclical ways that they would replace their troops. It puts the blood, the sweat, the tears, the death, everything right in front of your eyes. This is a tremendously good book. I recommend it. It's very easy to read. This is a great book to get you started on ancient history, on getting to know Steven Pressfield's writing style, and on getting to know this kind of writing that takes his history in a historical context and puts these, realistic characters. Now, following alongside that, what I would recommend is his two books that he has covering Alexander the Great. The first one is called The Virtues of War, I should say. This covers Alexander the Great. It puts you, of course, in the Macedonian prince's campaign. So it starts off setting the scene, and it talks about sort of when he witnesses battles of his father Philip. You see kind of how he conquered the Greeks, and then sort of the management of the Greeks as Macedon started to sort of revive itself and try and put its ambitions into play. And then all of a sudden Alexander comes to the lead of his army, and this is really sort of a treatise on leadership. Alexander's character is very well done in this. You grow to love him. He's very lovable. He has huge depth. The spirit of the army is really well put into this. You can see it's almost like if you were to see like a war movie today. It's high detail. You see everyone interacting, people joke. There's all these like idiosyncrasies of the characters, of each battle. It's not like, oh, this battle here, there were 5,000 men and they flanked. No, it talks about those men rushing, the shields hard on them, men yelling, the banners, waving, all this stuff. He really brings you into these battles, and so this is great. You get to see the Battle of Isis, of Gaugamela, all the various battles, capture of Babylon, and all the way until his battles against King Porus. and sort of when his troops turn against him, and it's this sort of conflict that Alexander has with himself. This is a really great book. Now, to follow up with that, what I would recommend is the Afghan Campaign. This focuses exclusively on Alexander's campaign in sort of the country of where Bactria was, where Afghanistan modernly is situated today. And it focuses on his 3 years that he spent in Afghanistan. Now, this takes place sort of following one of the Macedonian soldiers who goes out to the front to join the sort of Alexander's armies as it progresses, because of course it wasn't always the same core troops with Alexander. He would recruit more troops from home. So you get to see that. You get to see this kind of innocent child going to war, believing in the Macedonian cause, following their leader to the ends of the world, and sort of how he gets to, comes to terms with reality. Again, it's brutal conflict, and you see the parallels with today with the insurrectionists. You see them trying to conquer this kingdom in the mountains where there's all sorts of warring tribes. They can't tell who's against them, who's with them. It has a lot of similarities to today's combats. And it's just a brutal campaign. You get lots of battles, exterminations of cities, of towns, and it's really gets you into the idea of these battles as being, drawn out wars. And this is mostly focused on hit and run tactics. Not really these huge set-piece battles, but a lot of maneuvering, ambushes. This is a really good read to follow up on Alexander's campaigns. Next, that is also by Stephen Pressfield, I will recommend, is going to be Tides of War. Now, this follows, instead of the Macedonians, as we saw with the previous ones, this goes back to covering the Greeks. Now, this is going to be covering the Peloponnesian Wars between sort of the empiric cause of Athens and her allies against what would have been Sparta and her allies. And this is a really good book. All the characters, as always, are brought to full life. You can see here, it's pretty thick. It goes through a lot of details. Of course, some of this is history. The rest is kind of, made up, but it's not necessarily made up as in it's fantastical. It's really, bringing, again, the characters to life. It's really great. You see the failed invasion of Sicily, why they might have lost. You see night battles, night raids, different sort of how the armies lived, how they interacted, how they had their provisions, and how morale worked, how the inspirational leaders would have, really defined the history, the Spartan command, the Athenian command, the Athenian tactics of having their high walls and the fleets. Speaking of fleets, this has a lot about naval combat in here. It's really great. Something the other books don't really cover too much. This puts you in the seat of the rower, of the captain of the various triremes, the ramming tactics. This is a really good read for that. I would recommend it. Any of the works by Stephen Pressfield are exquisite. They're really good. 10 out of 10. I would recommend these as, your starter kits to get into this type of history. Next in the series that is also a little more towards the fiction side of historical nonfiction is going to be the Warrior of Rome series. Now, these are kind of like the game Rome, where it starts off in historical context and then it kind of weaves its way with its own storyline. That's how these work. Now, these are written by Harry Sidebottom. I know it's unfortunate, but they follow sort of in the later Roman Empire in 270 AD, I believe, or somewhere around there. Anyway, it's the later Roman Empire, and it starts off fire in the east. So you follow the character Maximus Claudius Ballista, and he's a northern barbarian who was raised among the Romans as sort of a political hostage for his Germanic father. And so he was raised in the ways of the Romans, and he makes his way up the ranks. And it's kind of like following Gladiator with Maximus. You really get to love the character for his leadership, for his courage, for his honor, for his martial prowess. And this has 5 books. It's amazing. So Warrior in the East puts you in the East as his, master of horse. There's all these political intrigue and battles and tactics. And again, as with the books by Stephen Pressfield, you really get a sense of what it would have been like on the front line. Again, it's as if you were there. All the characters have their own idiosyncrasies. Each battle is highly detailed. You learn about, Roman mentality, how they would have fought, and all this stuff. It's not like a history book where they say this battle happened here, this many troops were here, they flanked. Again, it's like, bringing you with the troops as they go flanking. And it's got an extensive look at all sorts of combat. Because it's more fiction, he has more ability to change the subject matter, and of course to write 5 books he's got to change it up. So you see all sorts of dynamics. Particularly what I loved was the various sieges you see in this. There's I think I've gone through 5 or 6 huge siege battles, all put out in details. You see the planning. So instead of just jumping right into the attack, you see the planning, how they would have had earthworks behind their walls to brace for impact of catapults, the mines and countermines it would have had, the rationing and all this stuff, the preparations of the legions, and all that stuff. This is a really, really good series of books. Again, the Warrior of Rome series by Harry Sidebottom. There are 5 of them. I strongly recommend these, and they're very easy reads. So now that we've covered these two, so Tides of War and the Stephen Pressfield novels are going to be more, the Hellenic type of thing, so either going over Macedon and Alexander, or sort of Sparta and Athens. Then you have more historical nonfiction, but now if you want to get into the meat of the reality and the historic parts of Rome, let's go into this. So the first one that you're going to want to read, or maybe if you want to do this chronologically, it's going to be The Rise of Rome by Anthony Everitt. So this one does a really good job of starting off with, as it says, The Rise of Rome. So it's broken up the book into various sections, going through the history of Rome, starting from its foundation around 753, all the way up until sort of the rise of the empire. So this book starts off at the beginning with basically the legends. So it starts off with the foundation of Rome. It starts off with the legends about Rome, Romulus and Remus, Aeneas, and stuff like that. So, Aeneas, for example, was supposed to be a Trojan prince who escaped and later went to Carthage. Started off what would later become the Punic Wars because of the intervention of gods and what he did in Carthage, and then he goes to the founding site of Rome, etc. But that's all like myths and legends that they created to tie themselves to the Greek civilization in order to sort of legitimize Romans. So there's all this early legends, and basically what he does is he lays it out for you and says, this is what the legends say about Rome. And then he goes ahead and picks it apart and talks to you about, this is what's most likely true, this is what is most likely to have happened. And then he talks about the early rule of the kings, talks about which ones do we know are true, what would have happened. And it's really, really great. And then he walks you through like the invasion, how Rome was sacked, Brennus who comes in. He has all these little anecdotes and stuff like that. He talks about Brennus, when he sacked Rome and the Romans had to pile on and on the gold until he was able to leave. And the barbarians were, they were doing scales to measure how much the Romans had to pay in gold. And the barbarians, King Brennus would throw on his sword to obviously disbalance, throw off the balance of the gold, so they would have to pay more. And they said, dude, come on, that's completely unfair. And he says famously, Vae victis, woe to the vanquished, and that's a really famous quote. So he has all these parts and details in here. It's really, really great. You get details about the spolia opima, which is the highest honor that a Roman soldier or general could receive, which is where in single combat the Roman leader would have to defeat the enemy general, strip him of his armor, and return victorious. So talks about a couple cases of that. And the first ones was of course supposed to have been Romulus, but that's probably not very credible. Otherwise it would have been a general fighting against the Etruscans at Veii. So this is really great. So again, it starts off with early history and then builds up until more and more high detail until you reach sort of the rise of the Roman Empire. And as that goes on, of course there's more history, because as Rome became more powerful, everyone was like, oh my god, look at these guys, they're so great. And particularly the Greeks were astounded by how this upstart colony, in the center of Italy eventually ruled the Mediterranean in what seemed like, it just jumped out of nowhere. And so people started getting, at the time, very interested in Rome, either Roman historians themselves or the Greeks, and they started writing more histories and taking more records about Rome and actually doing, retrospective analysis of old Roman history, and so you get to see more and more of that. Anyways, that's going to be a cursory look at the beginnings of Rome, and also some really good details about the Etruscans, the war with the Samnites. This is the only one where you really see battles against the Samnites. This is really good in the Etruscans in early history. This is a good start for getting you into the beginnings of Rome. Then what you want to do is you want to follow up and keep going with Adrian Goldsworthy. He's a really great author. So this one, if those of you who are coming here and who enjoy Rome because of the battles, this is what you're going to want to take a look at. Again, sort of another treatise on leadership. This one is going to be In the Name of Rome. Again, Adrian Goldsworthy. And this basically goes through all the famous Roman generals throughout Roman history and the Roman Republican Empire. And it not only does it go through the famous ones of Julius Caesar, the Scipios and all that stuff, but it goes through basically all of them throughout Roman history, whether you know of them or not. whether there's a lot of historical information or not. He goes through and basically tells you about, you know, what were the things the Romans were facing. How did this particular general revive his army, conquer the people he was supposed to conquer? What was the political intrigue around him? How did he change the legions? What were his battles? What were his tactics? This is really good for covering Roman generalship and also the evolution of Rome's armies. Now, it doesn't really follow, you know, a continuous history of Rome. It kind of jumps through between the generals, but this is a really good read if you want to jump directly to Roman leadership and Roman battles. Now, next, this is kind of my favorite, or it is my favorite period of Roman history, is going to be the Punic Wars. These are the books you want to read. So again, Adrian Goldsworthy, The Fall of Carthage, and this one is going to be The Ghosts of Cannae by Robert L. O'Connell. So they're both covering the Punic Wars. This one focuses more on setting the stage and then exploring the Second Punic War, whereas this one is the First, Second, and Third Punic Wars. They're both really good. This one, I would start with this one because it covers all the Punic Wars. It's really good, high detail, season by season, week by week, battle by battle. It goes through all of it, follows the various generals of both sides, talks about tactics. It includes maps, plans of the various battles and battle sites, the tactics employed. Yeah, let me try and pick out one of the ones here. It talks about the various campaigns, how the war started, the sort of interim time between the wars. It talks about the generals, as I said. And then here, for example, you can see the siege of Syracuse. It goes through, sets up the battles, the approach of the Romans, the defenses. It's a really great book that covers all of these, as I said, season by season. And when you get to Hannibal, it's just really awesome. I can't get enough. He's one of my favorite generals, and this is where you're going to go to learn about Hannibal. Of course, there's more specific books about Hannibal I'll recommend later, but these are more about, you know, broadly the Punic Wars, and I would recommend this one for all three. And then go ahead and follow up with this one. This is specifically about the Battle of Cannae and the legacy of Hannibal, going over the Second Punic Wars, not only battles and strategies, but kind of what happened to Rome, how it changed and was able to turn the tide of war. In both of these, Lake Trebia, Battle of Trasimene, Battle of Cannae, the failed invasion of Africa by Regulus, and then all this stuff. It's really, really great. So this would cover your thirst for the Punic War history. Next, you get Soldiers and Ghosts by J.E. Lendon. This one's pretty good. It's a little more weighty and a bit harder to read. The beginning part of it, you can see it's already pretty thick. The beginning part of it kind of takes a more scholarly approach to it. It's basically a theory that's trying to explain why the ancient Greeks, who so much were in love with Homer and the idea of individual combat, the warrior ethos, singling out another guy, fighting man on man, the honor of that. How could these people who so embraced Homer's way of fighting and that whole warrior mentality, how could they go from this one-on-one combat to fighting in massed phalanx? How did they make that connection? How could they still claim to inherit Homer's ideals while fighting as basically a blob of men? So it goes into talking about that. Then it goes into talking about Rome and early Roman warfare, and going through progressively Roman warfare. It has these cool sketches throughout artwork, kind of showing you what the Roman legions were like. It starts from the early sort of masses of Romans who early on fought in the style of the Greeks with sort of hoplites. Then it goes through the early legions and the manipular army of Rome, and then it goes into the cohorts later on. You get these awesome drawings here that kind of identify the different Roman armor and stuff like that. You get some Siege of Jerusalem is really, really in depth in this one, and then you also get some of the Gallic campaigns and stuff like that. Throughout here, you get the description of the legions, as I said, weapons, tactics, all that stuff. This is a good read if you want to focus a bit more on the scholastic analysis of warfare. It's a bit thick though, I'll warn you. Next on the list is going to be Caesar. I personally have not read this one yet, but it's by Adrian Goldsworthy, so I'm really, really excited to read this, learn more about the Gallic campaign. Now, I've done my own research on Gaul, Vercingetorix, and all the battles at Alesia. It's very, very impressive, and I want to learn more. So, you know, if you've read this book, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Let me know actually what you think about all these books. If you recommend any other books, leave, you know, something in the comments below. If you've read these and you like them, if you recommend other ones, that would be great to share. and in the description below I'll link you to where you can get all of these. You can get them online anyway at Amazon for like $5 to $10 each. You get them used, they're all good condition. You know, I find that people who get these history books treat them kindly. So yeah, get this whole thing, it'll get you ready for Rome, get you into that historical mindset, learn a lot more about Rome, and that game will be so much more enjoyable if you know the full context of it, and you can really appreciate the details that are in Rome too. Anyways, thanks so much guys for listening for so long. I will see you next time. Peace out. Actually, I'll end with this. Delenda es Carthago. Thank you.